This movie is regularly described as a cinematic masterpiece and is sometimes credited for giving birth to the slasher genre.
Is that a fact?
It is, actually.
From 1960, this is Peeping Tom. I'm Jay Harangue and I've wasted hours of my life watching terrible films.
You should subscribe.
Right, before we start, apparently some people get so attached to films that any criticism of them online sends them into a rage. If you're one of these people, either don't watch this or accept that these videos are supposed to be for fun and not serious cinema critiques. I'm not a film critic, I'm just a dickhead with a YouTube channel.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Anyway, we start by seeing this guy Mark Lewis walking the streets of London with this hidden camera. It looks like he wants to hire this prostitute.
It'll be £2.
Really?
In 2023, that would be £46 or 56 US dollars. Maybe you think that represents value for money, but I wouldn't pay £2 for that.
Count.
But he's not there to bang anyway. He's there to kill her on camera and watch it back later in his home cinema. The next morning, when her body is discovered and the police are hanging around, Mark's there filming with his camera.
What paper are you from?
The Observer. It's not true.
No, it isn't. He's just there to get some more footage before work. Mark works part-time as a photographer for this newsagent who sells pictures of scantily clad women to old pervs like this.
Well, he won't be doing the crossword tonight.
He goes to take photos of a couple of women that day, and one of them is disfigured. But Mark doesn't care. In fact, he loves it, so he zooms right up to her face. Cut to this girl Helen's birthday party. Helen lives downstairs from Mark with her mum, Mrs. Stevens. Mark's not been invited to the party, so he peers in through the window.
Of course. Well, isn't that what most people do?
To put it bluntly, no.
Although we don't see Mark knocking one out in the front garden, it's certainly implied. Helen and the other guests spot Mark when Helen decides to invite him to join them, but he's like, no, I'm all right, thanks. So he goes upstairs to watch his homemade snuff film, but oh no, Helen knocks on the door. Apparently she's decided to leave her own party to hang around with a weirdo in the flat upstairs. Here we find out that Mark owns the whole building and is merely posing as a tenant.
I'm the landlord.
Mark then tells Helen that he works as part of a film crew and hopes to one day be a director.
When I came in, were you looking at some films?
Yes.
She's like, oh, I'd love to see them. But he's like, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. But she insists. So he's like, okay then. He toys with the idea of getting his homemade snuff out, but thinks better of it.
Good.
Instead, he shows her this. Home movies his dad made of himself using Mark as a test subject for his psychological experiments. Strange thing to show her, but I suppose it could have been worse.
Yep.
Helen's like, fucking hell, Mark, that's a bit creepy. And Mark's like, it is, while he rubs his hands and face against his camera. Helen's like, right, fuck this, and walks into the other room. One of Helen's guests comes up and tells her to come back downstairs. For some reason, Helen still wants Mark to come to the party, but he's like, no thanks. The next day, we see Mark at his full-time job at the film set. After work, he has a date with this actress. Their date is them hanging around at the set after everyone else has gone home. Mark will be filming her, and she'll be dancing like this.
Okay.
Mark thinks this has gone on far too long, and at this point it's just irritating. So he shoves the camera in her face and shows her that he's converted the front leg of the tripod into a weapon.
Very impressive indeed.
So she's dead, and he stuffs her body into this box. Later at Helen's house, we find out that her mum, Mrs. Stevens, is one of these blind people in films who can sense everything.
Oh, I see.
Helen is going to go upstairs to see Mark, but her mum doesn't trust him because he walks quietly. Mark's bought Helen a birthday present. What is that?
That doesn't look good.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Really? No.
I'm going to put it on now.
Brilliant. Anyway, Helen's written a children's book about a magic camera and the pictures it takes. She asks Mark if he'll take the photos for the book, and he's like, yeah, okay. The next day on set, Mark gets his camera out to make sure he captures the moment when the body of the woman he killed last night is discovered. So the police are on their way. They're going to have to question the whole crew. Mark decides to bring his camera with him to his interview.
Mark, are you crazy?
Yes.
After his interview, he decides to watch more of the police investigation and film it from the ceiling. But oh no, some pencils fall out of his coat pocket and make a loud noise as they hit the floor.
Oh, dear.
Quiet, everyone, quiet.
I thought I heard a putty tat.
But it's fine, they just ignore it. The next night, Helen is telling her mum about the woman murdered at the film set.
Mark is in films, isn't he?
Helen's like, yeah, I'll ask him if he knew her. He's taking me out to dinner. But he's here already. Mrs. Stevens can sense him peering through the window. Mark comes in to meet Mrs. Stevens, and he gets wind that she's suspicious of him. Mark wants to take his camera out on the date, but Helen's like, come on, Mark, just leave it here. And he reluctantly agrees. On the way to and from the restaurant, Mark stops a couple of times. Once to watch this couple kissing, and another to look at this woman through her window.
He's a creep.
At this point, I have no idea why Helen is still entertaining this. How many red flags does she need to see? Anyway, when they get home, Helen goes to get Mark his camera. She tries to kiss him, but he's not interested in that. Instead, he waits for her to leave and starts making out with his camera. When he gets upstairs, he's about to start watching some of his footage, but he's not alone.
Good evening, Mark.
Somehow, Helen's blind mother has managed to get in. She's like, I hear you up here every night watching these films. Show me one. So he puts on the one of the actress he killed. He can show Mrs. Stevens whatever he wants, because she's blind. He decides that film was crap, so he's going to need to make another one. He's about to make Mrs. Stevens the star of his next one, but thinks better of it and tells her to go home. She's like, okay, but I can sense you're fucking weird. So go and get help, or you're not to see Helen again. And he's like, okay, fine. Then she feels his face and decides he's a deeply troubled man.
Correctamundo.
The next day on set, the police are there again, as is a psychiatrist to help people deal with the shock of finding a dead body. Mark approaches a psychiatrist and asks if he knew his dad, and he's like, yeah. Mark's like, I don't suppose you know the cure for Peeping Tom syndrome, do you? And he's like, yeah, a couple years of therapy would fix that. And Mark's like, fuck, that's too long. Then his friend shows him a picture of a woman, and Mark's like, thanks, you've given me an idea.
Yeah, I'll bet I have.
So Mark calls his boss at the newsagent to arrange to photograph a girl. One of the detectives is questioning the psychiatrist about what Mark was talking to him about. He's like, not much. He was just asking about Peeping Tom syndrome.
Peeping Tom.
The police follow Mark to his photo shoot. Mark knows they're following him, so he closes the blinds before he kills the model.
Smart.
Back at home, although Mrs. Stevens and Mark have agreed that he'll no longer be seeing Helen, Helen hasn't got the memo.
Memo.
It's a memo.
A memo.
Anyway, so Helen goes upstairs, but as Mark's not there, she leaves him a note by his projector. But then she thinks, oh, well, nobody's here. I may as well watch one of these films. But oh no, it's one of Mark's homemade snuff films. Mark gets home just as she's running out of the house. She's like, Mark, tell me what I saw on that film isn't real. And he's like, yeah, sorry, it is, sadly. She's like, okay, show me what you did to those girls. So he demonstrates the tripod spike thing. Meanwhile, the newsagent is calling the police, telling them the model Mark was photographing earlier is dead. So they head over to Mark's house. Mark sees them coming and doesn't want to face the music. So he runs neck first into the tripod spike. So he's dead. And that's the end of the film. So until next time. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. And please consider joining my Patreon. There's a link in the description. Thank you.